Welcome back to Sika Strength. Welcome back to Sika Stan. Now, today we're talking about Kamari Copeland. We're talking about a particular set of squats I'm sure you're very likely to have seen before. And it's a set of squats over 600 pounds for 10. Now, Kamari is a junior football player. He's starting off his college football playing career. He was with Army previously. I know he's with Virginia Tech now, as far as I know. And we've seen massive names in American football sharing this video, all the way up to JJ Watt, talking about how crazy this weight is. Now, at Sika Strength, we're strength and conditioning coaches. You'll have seen us talking about athletes training, talk about different forms of training and why you might want to concentrate on them or stay away from them. And today, when we're looking at this video, we're really looking at it in the context of how you might use high rep squats for your own training or for the training of athletes that you're looking after. Now, let's talk about the weight firstly. So it's 610 pounds by 10 reps. As far as I'm aware, 610 pounds was Virginia Tech's previous 1 rep max squat record. Obviously, Kamari here does it for 10. Now, to give you some reference on it, Kamari is 6'3", 280 pounds, so around 127 or 128 kilos. He's a monstrous dude. He's unbelievably strong, very, very powerful. We see it with his bench pressing. He's bench pressing kind of 430 pounds for 4. I know when he was at Army, he did 435 for 1. That was a year ago, and probably around 8 kilos of body weight ago. So his strength numbers are growing all the time. We see him deadlifting 600 plus pounds for reps very, very easily. Now, his position is on the defensive line, so obviously being very strong, very powerful, and particularly having a large work capacity in that high strength range is absolutely vital. A question that popped up over and over again, though, looking at this video, is why are football players doing squats that are so heavy and doing squats that had such high reps in them? So a lot of the time when we get videos that pop off quite this much, we get a lot of people who mightn't be massively informed watching the video, and then a lot of questions that just need to be explained a small bit more. So when we look at this video is coming out sometime around the end of June. You're pretty much bang in the off season for a college football player. They have gone through their full season. They've gone through that spring training camp, and now they're in their kind of summer off season. So May, June, July, classically speaking, is when you're going to get players very, very strong. If they have to put on size, they'll put on their size here, and then they'll go into their kind of pre-season prep, and then probably start some pre-season games end of August, start of September, or into the middle of September. So when we see this here, he's around a month into the off season, and this is generally speaking when we have athletes doing their high rep range, high work capacity strength training pieces. Now, people commonly talk about strength training as happening only in the lower rep ranges, and for this reason, we see many athletes, whether it be in field sports, general sports, or strength sports, often stalling out in their strength development or their general strength progressions. So when we look at a strength training block, let's take a classic squat block for an example. Ideally, if we're doing a normal strength training period, we'll start with our 8s, our 10s, maybe up into our 12s. We'll do a lot of work here, accumulate a lot of volume. And then as we go through that cycle, as most of you will know, we'll drop down from 8s to 6s, 6s to 4s, 4s to 2s, 2s to 1s, and go on from there. We might even taper at the end. So when we're looking at this is bang on for timing. We want high rep ranges, high work capacity, and this is going to give us that real foundational block upon which we'll build our strength period for the off season. Now, the other aspect with this high rep range work for football players is that he is gaining here not only in the building of a very solid foundation of his strength work, which is quite obvious and most people will know, but he's also gaining work capacity, and he's also gaining in the area of hypertrophy. So obviously in the last year, it looks like he's put on kind of 7 or 8 kilos of mass. He's a big dude and he's probably wanting to get bigger. And one of the key ways we're going to really drive hypertrophy is through that high rep range, high force output work. Now, when we watch a lot of hypertrophy stuff, you're probably watching bodybuilders talking about hypertrophy. There's a lot of really good tools we'll use to get there. So they might talk about slow tempo partials. They might talk about slow tempo eccentric work. They might talk about pause work. They might talk about time under tension. But in the case of a football player, the football player isn't just using this for hypertrophy. It's strength training leading on to power training eventually, and then hypertrophy kind of blocked in on top of it. So in this case, doing quite high force work, obviously over 600 pounds is definitely going to be high force, but doing that in high rep ranges will undoubtedly help with hypertrophy. Now, the second part here is work capacity. Now, a common thing that pops up when we talk about work capacity is that people only really think about work capacity in the area of aerobic fitness or aerobic capacity. Now, this is correct, of course, in some way where aerobic capacity is vitally important. We should be training aerobic capacity, but we don't typically train aerobic capacity with high force or high weight squats. But what we really need to look at here is the specific capacity demands of being on a defensive line in a football game. So obviously we don't need really good 10 or 5k times. We probably don't even need our VO2 maxes to be massively high. But what we do need is we need to be able to produce a certain amount of force over a certain amount of time. Now, when we look at a football game, there's obviously a massive amount of stops and starts, but there's also a really high force demand. So you're standing in front of someone, you're fending them off, you're having to move around the field, just moving that meat vehicle around, if you're 280 pounds, is going to be quite demanding on the system. And so even if it's only 10 seconds or 15 seconds of work, you have to be able to produce that capacity of work in that period of time. So here, when we look at it, it's not just doing the 10s for hypertrophy. We're not just doing those 10s to build a solid base for our strength work to get that 1RM number up, but we're also gaining really vital work capacity. So when we go into the more specific demands of the sport, you have that ticked off and you have that work capacity available to you. Finally, I've mentioned strength a number of times here. Obviously, 1RM strength is very, very important for football players. And this idea of getting 10 rep maxes, 5 rep maxes, 3 rep maxes along the way as you go throughout an off-season block is really, really valuable. So the first thing it does is it allows you to kind of tick a box. It allows you to ensure you're making progress. I'm sure even at this early period of Kamari's career, he has multiple ideas for where his 10 rep max has been. We've seen videos of 5 rep maxes, 8 rep maxes in his Instagram previously. So as he's going through this training block, he now knows that I've done 605 for 10 now. Last year, as far as I'm aware, he did 655 by 4. We've also seen a 675 by 1. Now, this is not only important in the context of knowing that he's put maybe 15 pounds onto that 10 rep max, but it also allows him to do a somewhat partially accurate forecast of where his 1RM number is going to be at the end of it. Now, this brings me to the last point here, and that is training of top-end 1RM strength for football players, for rugby players, for athletes generally speaking. Now, for being honest here, the 1RM number is not the most important thing for a football player or any field sports athlete. What they do on the field is the most important thing. But it cannot be overstated how important stats are when you're looking to be recruited. So in his case, he's playing college ball. He's obviously very, very high up there in the rankings. I think I've seen that he's ranked 10th in the country as a junior college player, 12th in the country as a junior college player by another publication. So he's clearly getting up there as being one of the best in that junior class of 2024. So what are we looking at now? Well, we're really looking at the ability to get drafted and to play in the NFL and to finally cash in on all the hard work he's doing. Now, we probably won't have 1RM testing at every club. We probably won't have every club being really interested in 1RM numbers. But for someone like Kamari to be able to push himself so far beyond what the other players are doing, for him to be able to say, I've taken Virginia Tech's old 1RM number and done it for 10, is clearly a check in that box. It's clearly a massive benefit to be able to look at those coaches or look at those scouting crews and say, look, you understand what my strength numbers are. You understand what I'll be able to do on the field. And this brings me to my last point. When we look at what they're doing on the field, the 1RM strength is not only important just in terms of the impact on the game, but in terms of the impact on the season. The stronger the player is, the higher that 1RM number is, the higher their ability to produce force is, the better he will be able to absorb force in the future. So a lot of the time we'll just think about it in the performance enhancement piece, but when we look at the ability to sustain injury, and in this case sustain massive impact on the body over the course of a quite long season, very, very few breaks as you go through it, a lot of games, a lot of impact, we have to look at a player. If you're recruiting a player like this, you have to look at how robust they are and how well they'll be able to stand up to a full season or a full period of games. Players are assets, and we don't want an asset that's going to break down frequently. We don't want an asset that will lose a massive amount of games per year to injury. And so in this case, having a young player that is incredibly strong should give us an indication that they'll be able to stand up to that force, obviously be able to put it on the field, but most importantly, I think, is that they'll be on the field more consistently, week in, week out, whether that's in training or in games themselves, and therefore be much more impactful on the season or the overall outcomes for that club or franchise. Now, I hope you liked today's video. If you're somebody in the off season, maybe you're a rugby player, a football player like Kamari, and you want to get some strength and hypertrophy work done in the off season, go take a look at the Sika Strength app. You can run it as a 7-day free trial. Take a look at the off season strength and hypertrophy blocks. Take a look at maybe the Road to Anywhere squat program or the Road to Anywhere squat 2 program, which is slightly longer, gets you a bit more of that high work capacity stuff in at the end, and you'll even get a 10RM squat as you go through the training cycle. Check out the link below and email us if you have any questions. Finally then, if there's other players out there like Kamari, if there's massive feats of strength or power or athleticism being done, please let us know in the comments below. We're always looking for athletes like this who are driving themselves harder and harder and pushing that needle in sports performance. We're massively interested in your opinions, what you have to say on the topic, and who you really like watching in the training room.